Welcome to the Fundamental Baptist Podcast. There are many types of Baptists, but being a Baptist once meant that you were a fundamentalist. Over the years, many Baptists have strayed from the fundamentals and thus attack those who remain true to the faith. This podcast will address the issues surrounding what it means to be a fundamental Baptist.
Somebody said, Brother House, fundamentalists are changing, aren't they? No, fundamentalists don't change. Folks quit being fundamentalists. God says when the troubles come, He said fight. You can't fight. He said withstand. You can't withstand. He said stand. What does it mean to stand? He said don't change. What? Don't change what? Number one, don't change what you believe.
Here we will reason concerning the scriptures about the doctrines we hold dear. We believe in souls being saved, lives being changed, and Bible doctrines being strengthened by the Word of God. We believe in the local church, soul winning, missions, and everything taught in the King James Bible.
I thank God tonight for this wonderful Bible. You know, I thank God it's a perfect book, and I love the Bible. Doesn't need any addition, no correction, nothing taken from it. Thank God tonight for the Holy Bible. I like it just like it is.
We are not ashamed of being fundamental Baptists, and we want to encourage others to remain true to the Bible, their Baptist heritage, and to not change what they have been given.
You just stick with the book. You can't beat this book. Why does every generation feel that we got to change it just a little bit because our daddy did it like this and our granddaddy did it like that, and let's change it just a little bit? You change it, and things that are different are not the same. The same commit thou to faithful men.
Thank you for joining us in our discussion of what it means to be a fundamental Baptist.
All right. Hey, hello, and welcome. Hey, we're glad that you're here. Welcome to the interview that we're doing with Mrs. Vickie Beller and her son, Jeremy, about her husband and his father, Dr. James Beller. Boy, I'm excited about this. He's been a hero and someone that we followed through the years, and it was God's timing to take him. Doesn't seem like it's to us. Seem way too young and too much of life. But the great thing about ministry is, though he being dead yet speaketh, and even though he's in heaven, his life and work and ministry is still going on and helping so many people. And we have a dedicated wife and dedicated son and family, making sure that those things still get out. So welcome, Mrs. Beller. How are you?
I'm doing well, thank you.
Not nervous at all, right? Just relax. So, Jeremy's the oldest of four. How old are you, Jeremy?
I'm 39.
Yeah, sorry for those tough questions. You know,
Yeah, that's
throw you right
hard-hitting question right now, boy. That's tell you what.
No, that's good. So, you notice I did not ask your mother that. So,
Good man.
Anyway, so I'm going to jump right in. And by the way, for everyone that's here, if you have any questions that you would like to ask Mrs. Beller or Jeremy, feel free. There's a Q&A button at the bottom. There, move your mouse down. The Q&A will come up. Click that, and any question you have, or you can put it in the chat. It's always easier in the Q&A when I'm done. That way I don't have to scroll through the chat if there's something. And just like anything, if you want to comment on things while the Q&A is going on, no problem. We'll put some links in there in a little bit to show you how things can be a help. So open-ended question there. And I just wanted to see how you would say this. So Ms. Bella, tell us about your husband. It's just an open-ended there off the top of your head, your heart. How do you feel? Tell me about your husband.
He was genuine. He was real. It was very funny, very, very funny. And he knew he was funny, but just as funny. He was just as sincere and loved the Lord. He was sensitive to the Holy Spirit. He was a man's man. No one intimidated him except God and a computer. And if you read the biography, you'll understand about the computer situation. But he was just a wonderful person, and I can't say enough. I do say a little bit about him in the biography at the end, but we were best friends. And yeah.
How many years has he been in heaven now?
10. This is the 10th year.
10 years. So it's hard to believe. Does it seem like forever, or seem like yesterday, or some of both? How is that?
Sometimes it seems like it's been forever, and then other times it seems that it's, it's just, you remember back smells or a picture or memory or something will flood back, and you put yourself back in there again.
Yeah. It's weird. Time, we don't really understand it, and boy, it can sure play games with us. Jeremy, what kind of dad was he? So many times preachers' kids, of which you are, quote, we have a reputation
Yes.
and things. What kind of dad was he, being a pastor and traveled and spoke and all those things? A lot of things to try to stay balanced on.
Yeah. There's a lot to unpack there. It's like, I will say that, yes, as a preacher's kid, I'm sure every preacher's kid understands this. There's a point where you realize that in some way you're sharing a little bit of your dad with a ministry, with other people. And we felt that. I felt that growing up, especially there was a particular time, especially when we were building the new building. That was some difficult times on the family. But I will say this about my dad: when he first of all, he made sure to have time for us. All of us kids were able to have like one night a week where we could stay up, usually with him. For me, it was Monday night, back when Monday Night Football was free and you didn't have to have cable. But that was our time, and he took time, as busy as he was. He took time for each and every one of us. I guarantee you, for any of us four kids and mom as well, he took time when he was there. He was there. He took time to be dad. And yes, it was difficult sometimes when he wasn't there, but when he was there, it wasn't like, I was spending time with Pastor Beller. I was spending time with my dad, and
Awesome.
That's what I saw.
Well, anytime in Bible college, I met a preacher's kid that was sharp, that loved God, that wanted to serve God, that loved his mom and dad and wanted to do something for God. I would always ask him, what did your dad do? What did your parents do? Because, the reputation, I think, is bad. I've met so many preacher's kids that are great, great people, but I wanted to find out what they did. And that's it. It's what you said, Miss Beller, is real. And he was there for us, and he was what he was in the pulpit and at home and things. The realness of that. So I know you covered this in the book. And by the way, I wanted to say right away, this is a book. You can see it in the background. And we'll get to the title in a minute. In Splendid Struggle. The beautiful quote in there about that. But his salvation story is amazing, from his background and where he came from. So Ms. Beller, tell about how he got saved and surrendered to preach through all that.
The Lord had been visiting him in different ways, and you'll read about different stories on how he sent different people to him as he was growing up. But it was about 17 years old. He went to Fox High School. He was going into a senior year, and he had a job that he always went out to to get the groceries when his mom went for the grocery day to bring in the groceries. His job was to get out and to bring all the groceries in and help her get them all put away. And so this was just a normal thing. Every week he went. And this one particular week he went and they reached into the back of the seat to get a bag of groceries. And there set on the seat was a little pamphlet, a tract called "This Was Your Life" by Chick Tract. This Was Your Life. And it looked very interesting to him. So he put it in his pocket and finished with the bringing the groceries in, and then he went back to his room and he looked through it and he read through it, and he was just intent all the way through, and he noticed the verses, like scripture passages at the bottom, so he knew it had to be some sort of scripture. But when he got to the back of the tract where the angel, the tract is about a man's journey into life, and that if he hasn't accepted Christ, that he would be going to hell, and the angel was getting ready to throw him into hell. And he got very angry and he tore that tract up. And when he would tell the story, he said, I tore it in a million pieces. And he was very angry about it. And then went the next day, it was fine. Everything was fine.
And angry because he didn't think that God would do that,
Right.
Didn't think
Exactly.
that God would send someone to hell. So
Exactly.
keep going.
Exactly. And so the next week, it was his job again. He went back to the car. His mom came in. And he went back to the car and reached to the back of the seat to get a grocery bag. And there on the seat was yet another.
The same one.
Same track. This was your life. We found out later that the church, one of the churches in the area, had been going to the grocery stores, and with all the cars that had their windows open. Back then, people left their windows rolled down, and they were going through and they were tossing those tracks into the car. And so when he saw it again, he got really freaked out. And he said, this has got to be from the Lord. So he put it in his pocket, brought all the groceries in, and then he went and he read it. He went back to his room and read it and reread it. And he had a Catholic Bible, took down his Catholic Bible and looked up the verses. And after many times, he told me after many times reading it, he finally knew and remembered back to the different times that people tried to reach him for God, for salvation, that he said he knew he needed to be saved. And he showed me the spot and over on Harris Lane. He took me to it and said, this is where I kneeled down and I trusted Christ to be my savior. And so
beautiful. Amazing to see a Chick tract, thrown into a car. You have no idea, no idea what's going to happen. And not at first. It's planting and watering, and then God gives the increase. What a beautiful, beautiful thing. Now, your husband was Catholic, right? Growing up, as background. So this was not something he was brought up with at all. And then I know there's a lot in there in the story. We can't tell it all. That's why you need to get the book, okay? But then his surrender to preach. When did he feel like God had something special for him to be able to be a preacher?
Well, he after he got saved, he looked around. He wanted to find a true church. He wanted to find the right church. He was really angry that he was never told this by the Catholic Church. And he called the 700 Club to say, hey, where am I? I just got saved. Where am I supposed to go? And they said, where did you used to go? And they said the Catholic Church. And they said, well, you need to go back there. And he said, I can't go back there. They didn't show me the right way. And so he went to Jehovah's Witnesses. He went to Mormons. He went all over. And in the meantime, he went from when he graduated from high school, he went to SEMO, Southeast Missouri State University. And he met with a man, Steve Proctor, and it tells a little bit about meeting with him. And Steve Proctor at the time was saved, but he was in a not a great church, more of a social club type of thing. But he started going to this church and he got right with God. And he invited my husband there. And anyway, he went there and he, long story, he walked down the aisle. He went to a tent meeting, and it talks a little bit about what happened with that. But he walked forward. He wanted to do anything to serve the Lord. He just wanted to serve the Lord. And so Steve showed him how to win souls. He just had a burden for winning souls. And long story, he ended up going to Bible college, his pastor. Mm-hmm. But he did make one decision, I think. Jeremy and I were talking about this. When he was at SEMO, he was a DJ. Yeah. And he wanted to own his own radio station. That was his dream, to own his own radio station. And he was very good at what he did, and they really liked him there. And one day he was doing after he had been saved, and he was doing this, and the DJ and the turntable and hosting and everything. And he started to really listen to the words and what was being said. And he thought in himself, I can't do this. Christians shouldn't be listening to this. This is wrong. And so the next commercial, the Lord pierced his heart so much that at the next commercial, he told his partner, Maureen, I quit. I can't do this. He went out, left. And his boss, he said, I quit, I can't do this. And the boss was even going to let him have his own program. They did not want him to quit. But he made the decision, and he decided, I can't do this. His dream and everything, he walked away from that. And he ended up going to Bible college, and then from there surrendered.
Awesome. I want to go back to Bible college in a minute because I think he met someone special when he was in Bible college. So I want to hear about that story. But
Yeah.
before we do, Jeremy, you helped put this book together. You were writer for it, and I know your mom had the stories and things there. But tell us about the title, and I don't know if you have that quote. I've got it if you don't. But the quote about that. Tell us about that.
Well, that was I don't know how far into the project we were when we were thinking about the title of it.
We were at the very beginning, really close to the very beginning. In every book of American Crimson Red, every book from the very first, and within the first few pages, you'll see this quote, but he never had his name under
At
it.
first.
It was his quote.
Yeah.
And the quote was, "Teach me, O man, what my young heart doth not know, and help me to live out my days in splendid struggle for a cause."
I remember as a teenager, reading these books for the first time, and I remember looking at them. I was like, that's a pretty good quote, because I love quotes. I love pithy sayings. And I asked him, I'm like, who's that? He's like, he just kind of looked at me. He's like, "You like it? Is it good?" I'm like, "Yeah, it's good. It's a good quote. What are you talking about?" He's like, "Yeah, that's me."
Yeah.
I'm like, "Well, why isn't your and at first, like, he would just put his initials, JRB.
No, he didn't do
Okay.
that. Yeah.
He didn't do that. So did
He
he put his name and all in there
No,
ever? Okay.
no. We had to talk him into putting his initials at the very end. It was like the last
I thought
two
he
or
ended
three-
up putting his name, but I guess you're right.
very end. We finally talked him into putting his initials because he thought it would make him
Self-aggrandizing. He didn't
Right.
want to be a guy.
Well, it is. Here's a book, and then here's a quote. It's right up front. And just you saying it, talking about it again, I got choked up. I got choked up when I started reading it. When you see that right away, teach me, oh man, what my young heart doth not know, and make me to live out my days in splendid struggle. And boy, splendid struggle, you don't see those two words together. And that just hit me because, and then knowing, me as a preacher 35 years, pastoring 31, reading the story of your husband and all the things that he went through. And, obviously, you only know that much of it. The full struggle would be, volumes, and people don't really understand, but it's worth the struggle. It's what Paul said. It's a fight, but it's a good fight. It's a good fight, and we may get beat, we may get knocked down, but it's worth it to fight. And it's a struggle, but it's a splendid struggle. Years ago, I had this teenage boy, and he's surrendered to preach, and man, he and his brother, they were on fire and soul winning and doing great. He preached in chapel, and 6 months later, he got backslidden, had a real hard face, and brought him into my office. I said, "What's wrong?" "Nothing." "What's wrong?" "Nothing." And I said, "Hey, let's watch something." I put a VCR tape in of him preaching in chapel, and he was excited and face excited. And I said, "All right, what happened?" I said, "Tell me you weren't happier then." He goes, "No." I said, "Look at you now and look at you then." I said, "What happened?" And here's what he said. He said, "It was too hard to fight. The fight was too hard." I said, "Man, I agree, man. It is a fight, but it's a good fight. It's a struggle, but it's a good struggle, in splendid struggle." What words to be able to put together. That was just so powerful for me. And it struck me because, well, how many times in life and ministry, and even people listening to this now going, "Oh, man, I'm done. I don't need this. I don't want this. I don't want to put up with this. Let me just live a normal life, take care of my family," all the pressures and struggle. And you have no idea unless you're there. When I first became a preacher, and I realized maybe probably 6 months in, like, oh, I remember studying the crowns, 5 different crowns, crown of rejoicing, and the shepherd's crown. There's a shepherd's crown. I'm going to get a crown I get a crown just for being a pastor. And the longer you're in this, you realize why you get a crown for being a pastor, because unless you've done it or lived it as a pastor, pastor's wife, or PK, you really don't understand that. So it's just beautiful. And the humility, but the fun too. Hey, do you like it? Do you like it?
Yeah.
What a fun thing to be able to do that.
To add on a little bit to what you were saying there, we could have made the book a highlight reel, right?
Sure.
Here's all the great things that he did. He did this, 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 the end. But we wanted at the very outset to show that this was not a perfect man. He struggled, as all good men do.
Absolutely.
And I thought about it later, and I'm like, why do we revere David? He's the guy that killed Goliath. He's also the guy who messed up and got back to God. And because of that, we have Psalm 51.
Amen.
You know, a lot of these men from the Bible, we know them and we celebrate them, not necessarily just for their victories, but because of their struggles. And I really wanted to really bring out the fact that, you know, Dad had a lot of opposition in his life. And, you know, I didn't want it to be, oh, poor him, you know, blah, blah, blah. But to show that anybody that's going to attempt anything great for God is going to struggle. But as you say, you know, it doesn't have to be a miserable struggle. It can be a splendid struggle. Yeah. And I think that was well put on his part to call it that.
I appreciate the humanity, because I'm reading that as a pastor going, been there, been there, you know, I mean, the building a building and finances and family and, you know, trying to do something big for God. I mean, you want to reach St. Louis with the gospel, you know, to do something big that's never been done. And like Paul said, you know, there's an open door. There are many adversaries, many adversaries, and you have that. And I appreciate you putting that in. And I think anybody who reads that will be able to help. You can see through all that, you can do some great things for God, but it's not going to be easy. There will be struggles. You can't read the Bible and see what Paul did great things, but boy, the struggle that he went through for that. So it was beautiful. I appreciate that. I think that was very well done. Like you said, it could have just been a highlight reel of the glories, but the realness of it is rough. And sometimes we don't share that. We don't share those stories, but I think we need those. And I remember all through college hearing every great man, and behind every great man, there were tragedies, there were heartaches. I mean, there were so many things they went through, from, you know, Spurgeon's health, and this man with his wife, and then, you know, Lee Robertson with his daughter. I mean, it's just every man, there was a burden to carry, that kept you humble, that kept you on your knees, that kept you having to go to God. So I think it was very well done that way. So, all right, Ms. Miller, tell us this romantic love story. Okay. How did he meet? Did you guys meet and sweep you off your feet?
This is all you. I don't want to talk about this at all.
Incidentally, when you were talking about the name Splendid Struggle, that's actually his handwriting in Splendid Struggle on that.
Wow. I love that, because even the colors you just found in there so neat, but it's a beautiful script, you know. That
is his handwriting.
That is beautiful.
You know, in the book, he had a lot of journals, so we had to go through a lot of his, and of course all of his handwritings. We've got several cabinets and fireproof cabinets of all of his handwriting, you know, of notes and everything he researching. So we had to go through everything to try to find in. Splendid was kind of hard and struggle. But anyway, that is his handwriting. So kind of incidentally, I thought I'd throw that in.
Oh, I love it. Thank you for that. No, I love the script of it and the words, and to know that that's it. It's beautiful, beautiful cover. Good.
Yeah. I don't know what you want me to say.
Was it love at first sight? Did he have to win you over? Did what happened? Because there's a story. There's a story here.
Well, I didn't say very much. We met in our freshman year. We visited, or we dated a couple times, and then we didn't date. And then we dated again in our junior year. I don't know how much to go into this. Jeremy knows the stories, but anyway, because this is about him. I don't want it to be about me.
Inquiring minds want to know. This is about him, how he found his bride. I mean, what bigger thing than that? So
I'll tell you this: he was proud of this story. The one I'm thinking of right now, he told me the story, and if you don't tell it, I will.
There we go.
I'll let you tell it.
Okay. Well, you got to correct me on some of the details.
Okay, it was our junior year. You can take it up from there.
I think I remember all of it. The main thing I remember is the fact of how proud he was of how it actually went down. So apparently the two had kind of like, essentially, Dad felt like, and if you knew Dad, you knew this was kind of, especially early in his ministry.
I'll set you up with this.
Well,
we dated, and then at Christmas, this was our junior year. Okay. At Christmas time, he sent me cards. I'm missing you. I can't wait. Called me. Can't wait to see you. can't wait till you come back. This junior year, college. I came back, and the first thing he said was, as soon as he saw me, we're not going to date anymore.
He didn't feel like he was worthy of her.
But found out later he wasn't sure he was going to be able to live the Christian, because he didn't have a lot of history, and he didn't want me to, if he fell, he didn't want me to be involved in that.
She was a preacher's kid, and
Right.
he was, his parents at that point not saved, not in church.
Mhm.
So there was a lot there that he was like, he didn't think that he was, royalty enough for her, I guess.
Go
At
ahead.
least at first.
Go ahead.
And then as I recall, and you can correct me, but as I recall, there was another guy that was interested in her, and so Dad sent her a note via another girl and said, "Hey, do you still like me?" And Mom sent back in the note, "No," because she didn't want him she didn't want him to come back to her in a note. She wanted him to come and tell her to her face that he still liked her. So, comes up to a point she was seeing another guy, but
we were dating quite a bit, and he thought that he had lost me. And
you need to finish this out, because this sounds better coming from you.
Well, okay. I was dating this other guy quite a bit, and he thought he had lost me, and he was lamenting the fact he'd go to work. He'd tell me later he went to work, and he'd pull out my picture and say, "Lord, is it too late? And what did I do to myself?" And so finally, anyway, one day he got enough courage and asked me out, and I said yes. When he asked me out, not through a note. And then for the next month and a half, he started dating me, and along with this other guy, because I wasn't going steady. So I'd get off a date with one and go on the date with the other, and they both knew they were going, and it was going at it. I'd have like 3 or 4 dates in the week for both of them. It was just driving me
Neither
crazy.
were serious yet.
Huh?
Neither
was serious. I mean, they were wanting to date, but neither had, I wasn't going steady or anything like that. We were dating. And finally, it just, I knew my heart was drawing it to him, to Jim. And I thought it wasn't fair to have this other guy go when I thought where my heart was going. So, and I will say this, everything that, like, I ended up in the infirmary, where you get sick. So I broke my ankle or something like that. And anything that would be done, he would do things like 10 times better than the other guy. And he would go overboard and do just really, he made sure that that he wanted me to know that he wanted me.
He won the prize.
And he was really excited.
That's exactly the way that he put it later. He's like,
by the way, your husband in heaven is glad I asked that question, and I didn't tell you I was going to ask. I know. That's why I didn't tell you I was going to ask it.
This is exclusive. You'll only hear this here.
I wasn't going to put it in the book at
but
all.
It's special. Anytime my wife and I are with another couple, we always ask, how did you meet? How'd you get married? How'd you date? It's always a beautiful story to see, one, how God leads someone to accept him as savior, and how God works in their life for them to surrender to the will of God, and then how God helps them to find their mate. I mean, those are just the 3 most powerful decisions, in life: salvation, what you're going to do with your life, and your mate you're going to serve God with. It really is powerful. So thank you for telling us that. And I promise you, your husband,
that was coming.
Your husband loves that story. Yep, I won.
Yes,
I got it. So
he was very proud of that fact.
He was very proud.
Awesome. Good. What are some things early in his life that influenced his life and ministry? It's not normal, what your husband did, what that's not the normal preacher to do those things and write the books in the Baptist history, that things we're going to get into. So what are the things that influenced him early on in his life and ministry to do that?
Well, I know there were some things in his family tree that he didn't even know about, that we feel, and we've included these in the book, that we feel had an impact. For one thing, and we mentioned this in the book, he's actually a descendant of one of the founding families of St. Louis. And we went back, we were able to document it. He didn't know that. for most of his life. He did, as a matter of fact, all of his life. He did not
didn't
know that.
We found this out while we were doing the book.
Wow.
And that was on his mom's side. And then on his dad's side, the name Beller was a peasant name, and it referred to someone who kept the bell, right? Well, what was the bell? Well, it was the alarm of the city. Whenever you wanted to spread some news or you had a warning, you went to this guy. This guy took care of that bell. And
in the 1600s, the German people took their last name by the job they did. And so for the Bellers, they were known to take care of the church bell.
Right.
And so they would ring out the alarm, ring out the time, but they also would sound an alarm for any type of a warning for the people in the community. And it's interesting that that's what he was doing was in his life as he's preached around in his book, Sacred Betrayal is a book of warnings.
Yeah.
And how that he sounded the alarm. So I just want to kind of clear that.
So he had a strong connection with St. Louis. And eventually, down the road, that is what would really lead him down to where God wanted him to be. First, of course, starting a church in St. Louis. But then and I don't want to get too much ahead of ourselves, but in researching about St. Louis, that's what led him down into church history and then Baptist church history as well. So he had St. Louis.
That's a big question there, and someone's already put in a Q&A and asking that. And so the St. Louis, so the family, this is the book there. I've had it for years, but the Spirit of St. Louis, the Soul of St. Louis, a historic narrative of a revival in the Gateway City. And so researching this, your dad, your husband started a church in St. Louis, then merged with another church, right? And became the Arnold Baptist Tabernacle, if I remember the story right. So he studied this book about St. Louis, and that's what got him into Baptist history. Is that correct?
Well,
in a way.
Well, actually, the book, he never started out to be an author.
Right.
When he started it, we were starting a church, both the churches we started and merged together with Arnold Baptist Tabernacle. He started wanting, he had such a burden to see people saved, and he would hear from other preachers that it can't be done here. There's a curse on the city. You can't be done
because of Budweiser.
And that hurt him. That he's like, does God not care for St. Louis? Why? So he thought, and he would tell me, he said, if God did it in the years ago, he could do it again. If we could just look and see if God had ever done this before. So outside of pastoring and taking care of people, he would research and go in microfilm and look and see, had God ever done anything in St. Louis? And the front of the cover of the Soul of St. Louis is Gypsy Smith. And he's preaching in the Coliseum in 1909. And he started seeing that, yes, it was done. And if it was done before, if we did the same thing they did with God calling on the Lord, he could do it again. So he got all this stuff, not for a book, he got it for himself to, to encourage him. Wow. And then one day he came up and said, I think we need to put this in book. If this encouraged me, maybe it would encourage other pastors. So then he took all of his notes that was just for himself and he put together to encourage other people. And so that
was that the first book? Is that the first book you wrote?
Soul of St. Louis.
He had written a pamphlet before that, I believe that. Why I left the Roman Catholic Church.
He wrote actually several pamphlets.
Yeah, I remember seeing that. That was a great, saw a little cover in there. But the first book he wrote, what a beautiful thing to encourage him. Can it be done here? By the way, Gypsy Smith, we live close to Nashville, and there's a great story there of Gypsy Smith and the whole Grand Ole Opry. That building was started by Gypsy Smith. There's a neat story, not to go into, but anyway, it's just there's some neat history on another time we could talk about of what happened there. Captain Ryman was a steamboat captain, and the guys were going to get drunk and go disrupt Gypsy Smith's tent meeting that he had, and he happened to be preaching something about your mother and embarrassing your mother, and he did, and he ended up getting saved, and he had some money and influence, and he said Gypsy Smith will never preach in a tent in Nashville again, and he built this auditorium. It's called Nashville's Church, and later after he died, they named it the Ryman Auditorium. He did not want it named after him, and then the Southern, what's the country? Sorry, country music. Country music took it over the Grand Ole Opry, and that became the home of the Grand Ole Opry and all that. But anyway, neat. Wow. Gypsy Smith, the connection with both of those. You get into that. So from there, in writing that book, that's what. So was the next one Baptist history, or his start in that, his love for that? Obviously, he went in that deep, and have that book here if you don't have it. By the way, I'm going to go ahead and hit this because I know we're 35 minutes into this, and we plan on going for a while. I have some more questions I want to ask, and I think you'll enjoy it. It'll be interesting, but I want to make sure that you get these books. Okay, so prairiefirepress.com. I put the link in there. prairiefirepress.com. You can go get all these. American Crimson Red, 550 some pages and footnotes and endnotes. I mean, just amazing research that's done in this. And I don't even know if I have the newest edition or if there's more, in there with what you guys have done, and workbooks, and how we got connected through Independent Baptist Online College. We knew of him and his teaching and his book, and we said, is there any way we could offer his courses through our college? And so we have, I believe, 3 courses of Brother Beller's in our college, that even though he's in heaven, he's still teaching, he's still influencing people. And boy, what a powerful thing that is. And we love that. So you can go to ibaptistcollege.com or .org and be able to see those. So tell us about that, getting into, because in our circles and Independent Fundamental Baptist, he has become, I know he didn't want to count himself this, but a scholar and an historian in Baptist history. And so very curious how he got into that.
Well, I know based on what because I was probably in my preteens when this started coming out. I know that the years just before that were pretty tough on Dad. He was really, really trying to get the church to a certain level that he felt like it needed to be. And
yeah, but I think more so than that, he felt that St. Louis was so big.
Yeah.
And that he wasn't doing it justice.
Yeah.
He felt like somebody else should come in and somebody else should do this, because there were so many people and he wasn't making it. It was really frustrating him.
Yeah.
That he just had a heart to see people saved. And I don't want to keep picking him.
No, that's all right. What ended up happening was a preacher from out in North Carolina called him up. And I think you want to tell this because this is like it sounds better coming from, because Mom was kind of standing right there.
Yeah.
When the call came through,
the Soul St. Louis started getting out, right? We actually had 2 churches started because of that. And there's a different story. There's a bunch of stories about the Soul St. Louis, but we won't get into that. But anyway, it was getting out. It was at the Arch. It was at a lot of places in St. Louis, but it was getting out quite a bit. And it reached a man in North Carolina that read it. And he was, one day I was with him, and he got a call from this guy and this pastor, and he said, I'm in North Carolina, and he said, we have a Baptist history tour, and we would like to fly you, all expenses paid, for you to come and go on this Baptist history tour. Well, we both graduated from a Baptist college, and neither one of us knew any Baptist history. We weren't taught Baptist history. Mm-hmm. And so anyway, he was already discouraged and everything as far as his soul winning. It felt like he was not getting people saved like he should, that St. Louis was so big. Anyway, so he started talking to him, and the guy said, I want you to come and we will pay all expenses paid. Well, he put the phone down, covered it up, and he leaned in and said, this guy says he's going to pay all expenses paid for me to go on this tour. Yeah, right. He was real sarcastic. And he picks up the phone and says, sure, I'll go. And he said, okay, thank you. Thought nothing about it. And so in about a week or 2, he gets something in the mail. He walks in and he shows me, said, this was real. I have to go. I told him I would go. I don't want to go, but I have to go. So he was so shocked that it was real. Well, he went on he flew there and went on the Baptist history tour, and he saw that he thought before that Baptists must have been bumpkins, that the Lord never used Baptist people.
Mm-hmm.
And he started seeing how God had used Baptist people throughout history. And there was one in particular, a grave in Groton, Connecticut, where Valentine Whiteman, where he saw that Valentine Whiteman pastored a church for, I believe, 40 years.
Mm-hmm.
And his son,
Mm-hmm.
he died, and his son pastored for 40 years. And I believe there was 4 generations.
3, I think.
Was it 3?
Yeah.
His tombstone is actually a life-size pulpit. Valentine Whiteman's is. But anyway, when he heard the story of Valentine Whiteman and how he went and stayed faithful at his gravesite, he decided, he rededicated his life at his gravesite. And then from there, he started wanting to learn more on Baptist history, and it ignited from there, from that Baptist history tour.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And this is the Baptist history of America. You know, there's other history books, about Baptist history, and anyone who truly knows Baptist knows we are not Protestants. We did not protest out of the Catholic Church. We were never in the Catholic Church. There is no date, there is no name, there is no man you can find like Martin Luther or Calvin that started Presbyterian or Lutheran. You can't find that anywhere. How come? Because it never was. And I love the name Baptist, because in the Bible, the true church got the name given to them derogatory by the world. They were first called Christians, derogatory term. That way, the sect of the Nazarenes, can any good thing come out of Nazareth? All 3 of those biblical names were put downs by the world. And the same thing with Baptist, Anabaptist. We're rebaptizing who the Catholic Church already baptized. And that's where the name came from, which is a truly, truly biblical name given to us by the false doctrine and false religion people. So to be able to love that, but to be able to find it, and it's sad we don't think that the Baptists did a lot. But how many Baptist churches are they? Where did they come from? Obviously, they had to do it, but we spent our time winning souls and planting churches, not writing history books. And I think it's sad, and I'll go ahead and one little hobby horse here, but so many Christian colleges, when they teach church history, they teach Catholic church history. That's their church history course. And they don't even hardly mention the Baptist. And so that's not church history. That's a false church history from the Council of Nicaea and Catholic Church, and then the protesting out of it. And they think that's true history. No, what your husband put together, that is true church history. And that's what we need to hold on to. And there needs to be a revival of that, and to be able to see what I'm going to ask about. Well, since we're on it, I want to ask, so the multiplying model. Okay. Tell us about that book and your dad. Where did you find that, your husband, the multiplying model of planting churches and what needs to be done, and that book? You want to talk about that for a minute?
Go ahead.
Well, she had for that book, he got a lot of that out of the Separate Baptist model, but in essence, he really got it because Separate Baptist got it from the New Testament model. I remember one of the main things that he mentions in that book is that he said there's 2 kinds of church models. He said there is the I believe he calls it the dying model, and then there's the multiplying model. And he mentions about, he said, if you take a church and you start a church and you build it up 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 and you build it up. Well, no matter how good that man of God is, eventually that man of God is going to die. He's going to pass off the scene, and maybe a good man of God comes and replaces him. Maybe doesn't. Maybe. Exactly. I mean, you have only, just look at the ministries of Brother Robertson, and others that were great men of God who built great works of God. What happens to those works when those men are gone? Eventually it dies. But he said the way that the Separate Baptists did it, which they got from the New Testament, was churches that are taught to plant other churches, who then teach those churches to plant other churches. Amen. A multiplying model, that the church is always looking to replace itself, because you realize the church you have right now, it'll last for a while under a good man of God, but only for a little while. So the only way, and just like, if you have a crop outside, right? And that crop will last for a while. It'll bear fruit. But if it doesn't produce seed for another
good.
crop, eventually it just dies and you don't have anything. If that crop doesn't leave seed behind of itself, and the way he put it is he said we're supposed to bear fruit. What does that mean? Christians are supposed to bear other Christians. That's true. Soul winning, right? He said, but that means churches do the
Amen.
business of planting other churches, reproducing ourselves. And that's what he gets into the multiplying. There's a lot of little, hints and this is the way that we did it or whatever. And there's a lot of different techniques, I guess you could put it. And some areas they may work in, some areas you may have to do something different. But the real mindset is my church more interested in building an empire, or is it interested in reproducing itself elsewhere?
Amen. Amen.
That's
We have in our
it.
college, and it's called the Judea Project, and trying to help pastors to train their own and go to that next town over
Right.
and plant a church, not start a church. Start a church is somebody goes somewhere else and starts one. But when your church plants it, and you got people that live close to there anyway, you got people that are already trained. And so for 6 months, they go and work in that church, and they're the nursery, and they're the ushers, and they're the music, and help that church get going. Then they can decide to stay with that church or go back to the home church. But now that church is going and it's planted. And it's
Right.
like a strawberry. We grew up on a farm with a strawberry patch, and you see that little strawberry plant and has runners off of it, and it sends it off, and that strawberry plant produces 10 plants off of it, and then those produce 10 plants off of it. And
Right.
boy, if our churches did that. You did a great job, Jeremy, explaining that. You really did. And that model needs to be done. Christians, the fruit of a Christian is a Christian.
Right.
The fruit of a church is another church, and we need to be doing that. You look at like a Dr. Fugit, in Kentucky, and 50 some churches they've planted in Kentucky and other places there. Just what a great model. If we had churches doing that all over the country, we would save this country, and then to do the same thing in the world to save the world. So love that. Love that.
Amen.
On a personal note, and probably this is for you, Mrs. Beller, your husband, the struggles, how do you handle the ministry trials, the finances, his health issues, your daughter's heart, staff members that hurt you and hurt the church? How hard is it to be a pastor and to be a pastor's wife?
Well, I was also a pastor's daughter. So I kind of from early on, I saw the struggles that go in, and that you just have to keep trust in the Lord, and that he knew what was going on, and just having faith and pray and just follow what it does. It's not necessarily what comes about it, but the fact that you are obedient and following what he gave you to do. And whether it's a tremendous success in man's eyes or not, if you're doing what he told you to do, then you're a success in God's eyes.
Yeah.
So just to continue. And I think as far as being in the ministry, you really need to make your husband your best friend.
Mm-hmm.
I've seen too many times where maybe a pastor's wife or whatever became real good friends with people in the church, and they turn around and stabbed them, and it was kind of rough on them. And so making each other your best friend, I think, besides the Lord, obviously,
Right.
that walk with God, and knowing that we tried really hard to keep positive, like through different things that we went through, especially early on. Like we had to really we had to scrape by, and so we called it different things. Like we called it camping. Camping isn't permanent, and you have to learn to rough it. But it's a mindset. You keep, the Bible talks about David encouraged himself in the Lord, and you have to keep encouraging, knowing that you're doing what he called you to do, and you just keep on. But we try to continue to encourage each other in the Lord.
I love when I read that about camping, knowing that, hey, there's times in life when you just got to rough it. It is a rough time. And Jeremiah, I think truly this is a grief, and I must bear it. This is a part of it. And on the other side of it too, how many times in those burdens because you don't quit, you get to see God turn them around. I mean, what a
Oh,
miracle with your
yeah.
daughter's heart, or
Yeah.
finishing a church building, or, finishing the book. I mean, any of the struggles and splendid struggle to get to the end of that. What a joy and a blessing that is to
Absolutely.
be able to have that. So,
Absolutely.
good. Jeremy, what about you as a son seeing that? Were you aware of struggles your dad had? Did he hide them? Was it open? And did you relate with any of that? Did he share, in preparing the boys for life and leadership? How was that as a son?
I'll be honest with you, there was a lot of those struggles that we did not, as us kids did not even know about.
Yeah.
Um, as far for on the people side of things, um, there were times when, you know, somebody at church would kind of look at me funny, and I'd be like, oh, okay, well, hi, I go up and say hi, because that's what you do. It's Sunday morning, so you go up to a church member, hi, how are you doing? They're like, oh, and you don't find out till later that that person just had it out with dad, but he never told us about it.
Mm-mm.
He was very careful, to try to keep as much as possible, to keep that
Awesome.
separated from us, to keep us separated from that. That being said, yes, there were times when you could tell, I could tell even, as a pre-teenager or whatever, dad was going through something. And I'll tell you what I remember.
Hmm.
If there'd be times when mom would come out and we're out there quietly playing and stuff like that, mom would come out to the playroom and she'd say, hey kids, come here for a minute. Once you go in there, your dad's sitting there and he feels really sad. Didn't tell me why, didn't tell us why, didn't tell what was going on. She'd just say, would you just go in there and just give him a hug and let him know that you love him? But we'd go in there, and we didn't know what was going on. We didn't know the struggles he was going through, but we just know dad's sad and we need to give him a hug. So let's go give him a hug. And I remember I had this little Bible promises booklet, it was like this big. And I was like, Dad, let me read you a verse. Here, this says, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. See, God created the earth. So that's encouraging, I'm trying to encourage him by reading the Bible to him, and he would just, at that point, he'd break down and hold us and stuff. I will say that mom was such a great encouragement, to him and to us, and what she said about keeping the same attitude. I remember, when it was financially difficult, we were not allowed to say we're poor. We were not allowed to say that. We could say we're broke. We could say, because I was getting to the point at that point where I understood finances, right? So I'm like, oh, are we doing this because we're poor? No, Jeremy, we're broke. We're not poor. And but that attitude, though, the attitude of gratefulness for what we did have, and that's what I was raised on. I was raised to be thankful, and yes, there were dark times, there were difficult times, but we knew that our parents loved us and that God was good and that he was going to see us through. You know what? He did, over and over again. And
Amen.
I wouldn't trade those experiences for anything.
Amen. Jeremy, we were trying to see before if we had met each other, and I don't know that we have, but I love so much that you headed this up and worked with your mom for this book and would be willing to come on and do this, because it does give us a different side of your dad by you getting to tell these stories and as a son seeing those. And I think that adds a lot to it. And what a beautiful way to say that. One of the things about the book that I thought, by the way, thank you for the questions that you guys are sending in. We are going to get to those in just a little bit. Thank you for those. So they're not bad. She was nervous. She was nervous when I said, you ought to see our text thread over the last week or so. It's like, they're going to get to ask questions. Like, I'll filter out the bad ones. So anyway, so they're good. So feel free to ask any. We're going to go through that in a minute. Prairie Fire Press. Tell us that story. Okay. So that's where you go to get these books, prairiefirepress.com. So how did that name come about? So tell us that.
He was probably, I believe we had the new building. He went through two separate building programs. I believe it was the second building. There was a man named Buck Freeman, and I lost contact with him. I wish we could tell him the story because he was so important to the story. But whenever he decided he was going to go ahead and publish Soul of St. Louis, it didn't have the name at the time, but he was going to publish his notes. He said, well, first we need to he tried to do a lot of research. It was going to be self-published. If it's going to be this, it's going to be that. He decided to go ahead and self-publish it. So we needed a name. So he threw around different names, Turtle Publications and different things. Cause anyway, so we were thinking and kind of praying about what would the Lord want us to have. One of the Buck Freeman, he went out soul winning a lot with my husband and just out soul winning in general, but he had a real true heart, really genuine heart. But he would call him Pastor Prairie Fire. Hey, Pastor Prairie Fire, how are you doing today? And he just always called him Pastor Prairie Fire because he preached like he was on a prairie fire. And so from that, my husband looked at me and said, why don't we call it Prairie Fire Press after Pastor Prairie Fire? So that's where Prairie Fire Press comes from. Because
love it.
It's called Pastor Prairie Fire.
No, that's great. Jeremy, I have a short little one for you, but what was your dad's birthday and was there any significance about that?
December 7th, 1957. 56. A day that will live in infancy. That was what Dad
he laughed about that.
He thought it was really funny. It was just
I love that little part of the book. So here's a dad jokes, corny things, so
and kind of a dark joke if you think about it.
Yeah. December 7th, and so when Roosevelt said a day that will live in infamy, then that's your dad's birthday, and he said that. So what a cool thing. I just thought that was a neat little thing. One more question I have about the book. Then what I'm going to do is take the questions from people, and then I want to open it up. Anything I didn't ask you guys that you would like to be able to say. So the journaling I thought was amazing. Reading this book, most of the time you read a book, you read a biography, or if it happens to be an autobiography, then he's writing it himself. I've never read a book where it quote almost is an autobiography, because there's so much of his journaling and what he put in there. These are his words, his story, his outline. And boy, how fascinating that was to be able to look and see. I wasn't expecting that when I saw that. So you mentioned a little bit about it already, and you have that. Did he always journal? And one question, by the way, somebody already asked in that was, well, go ahead and answer that, and then I'll go through his question, make it separate.
He journaled all the time. He had notes. I will say this. Should I say that about what he said not to? Well, he was journaling. Too late
now. You got to tell us.
Well,
and it's been 10 years, Mom. Come on.
Well, he said, I want to keep notes to myself. And he said, I don't want you looking at them. And I said, okay, I trusted him 100%.
Sure.
And I said, okay. He said, I want to write down my notes. I want to have complete time just to do my notes. And I said, no problem. And I never did. And it wasn't until about 7 or 8 years after he passed away, when we started thinking about the biography, I thought, should I open his journal? Because, I told him I wouldn't, open it. And should I do that? Is he going to come down to heaven and smack me silly? What am I going to do? But and I respected him so highly, and I talked to the kids, and I thought about it, and I thought, okay, I'll just open it and just see. There was nothing wrong with it at all, but he was very open. I just put excerpts from his journal, but he was very open about his health that he wasn't telling people about, and I don't think he wanted me to be scared or nervous about it.
Yeah.
But one particular thing he put in there was on March 27th, 2000 through 2003. because it was exactly 10 years in a day. He passed away on March 27th, 2014. On March 27, 2003, he put in this journal, I believe I only have 10 years left. That means I would be 56 or 57. That was 10 years and 11 years to the day, because he passed away on March 27th, 2014.
Wow.
And he was very open in his journal, and I really struggled to see, should I put it in there? And I really prayed about it, wanted to get people's thoughts on it. But I really believe he would have wanted me to go ahead and put his
Absolutely
thoughts in there. I prayerfully, carefully made sure that everything I put in there. But yes, he did. He kept a lot of meticulous notes about what he was going through, about how he felt. So I wanted you to be able to hear from him on his side, in his heart, how he was feeling, how he was going through during those struggles. And
glad you did.
So I hope that when I get to heaven, he's not mad. I don't think he would be.
No.
I tried
He'd
to
be honored
at that point.
He'd be honored. And you understand, if you're a pastor and you're wanting things, doesn't want you to worry about it, that's private. After you pass away, wow, you just have this wealth of knowledge and and words from your husband. How precious that must be, to be able to have those and to be able to use them to help other people. I thought that was really good. So
it was amazing. It was amazing. So
last question I have here, and it's sort of a two-part one. So what are all the books that your husband wrote, and how would your father want to be remembered?
The books he wrote, he did write some pamphlets. While I left the Roman Catholic Church, he wrote Soul of St. Louis that you mentioned. Because of the Soul of St. Louis that got into the hands of a man, he went to the Baptist History Tour. He did a 5-year research, 1620 to 1905, and he wrote American Crimson Red. And that book is out all over. In fact, his books are in every state, out of country, just all over. But he wrote American Crimson Red. While he was doing research on American Crimson Red, he was also doing American Crimson Red would have been the middle book of a 3-volume set. So while he was researching American Crimson Red, he was also researching what would come before ancient Baptist history, and then what would come after. And so while he was also researching ancient Baptist history, he taught the high school, which Jeremy was in. That
we were the
high
guinea
school.
pigs. My 10th grade year, I think it was.
And he taught them, and what he taught became the Baptist History Workbook, the Collegiate Baptist History Workbook. And anyway, that actually came out before American Crimson Red.
Wow.
The year before. And then there's American Crimson Red. There's a study guide. There's Multiplying Models, Sacred Betrayal. Whenever he started traveling all over the country, the first question that people would ask him in every church, the first hand, why don't we know our Baptist history? What happened? Sacred Betrayal is an answer to that question.
It is.
I don't have that one, but I'm going to get that. Sacred Betrayal. That is your dad, your husband, is a great wordsmith, just even in the titles. I mean, from the spirit of St. From the whole spirit of St. Louis to make it the soul of St. Louis. Oh, what a play on that. What a great thing that was. And splendid struggle. And
Dad loved titles that would get people's attention.
Yeah.
Full disclosure, Sacred Betrayal is not the original title of this book. Dad was so concerned, not just about the past as far as the lack of Baptist history, right? He was concerned about when Baptists lose their history in their past, it causes them to lose their identity in the present,
absolutely,
and their future as well. Case in point, what happened with the Catholic Church long time ago, they lost their past. They used to be, the word Catholic used to mean universal. It used to mean what we all believe as Christians. But what happened? They lost their past. They lost the fact that at some point they actually had a connection to the real church. They separated from it, and look where they are now. Same thing happened to the Protestants. Dad was worried, and this is borne out that the exact same thing is already happening to Baptist churches. Baptist churches either losing their doctrine, losing doctrines that are important, or basically coming out and saying, look, the real important doctrines basically are salvation. If you got that right, the rest of it, take it or leave it, basically. And you've got Baptist churches that are saying that, and what's happening is they're losing, as Dad put it, they would lose their identity. So what he called this book at when it first came out, this little black book, he called it the coming destruction of the Baptist people.
Wow.
Yeah.
But he also called that because he saw the Baptist people being very nonchalant about the Baptist history.
Absolutely.
That made him really irritated. And he said, because they were just apathetic. And he said, there's no emotion. He said, at least if I could make them mad, that would be an emotion. He's telling me this. At least if I can make them mad, then from there we can instruct them and help them to know what the Baptist history. So he called it the coming destruction of the Baptist people, and he had people really angry, really angry. And then from there, but he was going to change the title, but he wanted to at least get an emotion. Yeah. So
that's powerful.
Called it the coming destruction.
And it's real. And Jeremy, interesting that you said this as a young man, but when you see these churches and the next generation of independent fundamental Baptists, and so many pastors, their kids now being preachers, and that's what they say: just preach the gospel, just preach Jesus, that's all you worry about. And man, I go soul winning all the time. We lead people to Christ all the time, but that's not the whole Bible. It is the whole counsel of God. Is to preach everything, and you have to stand and fight for each one of these, or you'll lose all of it. And so many people don't understand that, and that is neat. Your dad saw that. If you don't know what you believe and where you came from and all those doctrines, you're going to lose that, and the next generation will be gone. That's powerful. I'm so glad you brought that up. So does that cover what your husband would want to be remembered for, or is there something else that he talked about, or that you think?
Wrote other books, and they can go up on Prairie Fire Press and look at the other books. But the one thing, we had a conversation one day, and he looked at me. He was very serious. He was very serious about the ministry. Took what he did very seriously. He was funny, but he took God's word and God very, very seriously. He was not flippant about that at all. But he looked at me one day and he said, "You know what? I want to be remembered as a visionary." And I said, "You do?" And he said, "Yes, that's what I want to be remembered as." The Lord gave him different visions, and he followed. He wanted to do God's will, and the things that the Lord gave him to do, he followed those and did accordingly. And he wanted to be remembered as a visionary.
That's awesome. That's awesome. All right. Brother Vogel is on here and asked that we already talked about what prompted him to start researching Baptist histories. You already answered that well. And Brother Vogel, thank you for that. So someone asked, do you plan on publishing more of Brother Beller's writings in the future? And how about the 3-volume set? Is this oldest son going to take these notes and let's do the first volume and the third volume? Anyway, what's the future for that? Have you guys thought about that?
We have some different things in the works. Yes. We are working right now. We've had a lot of requests on doing American Crimson Red in audio. We've had a lot of requests for many, many years.
Awesome.
We are working on that, and I believe that next year we'll be able to have that ready for you. Yeah. We are working on different projects. Yes. We have multiple file cabinets packed full of all of his research. If you saw all of his research and his computers, you could go in, open a folder, and it's packed. You go into one folder inside that folder, and it's packed. You go to the one folder inside, you can get lost. Wow. In that. And we really want to be a blessing to God's people and get this information out. But as far as, and so we're praying on what is next, what God wants for us to do next with all of it. He was always working on 2 or 3 books at any one time. So yes, we have a lot of information on the ancient Baptist history that he did. We went to Europe for 3 weeks. Wow. And we have a lot of video. We have a lot of research on that, on our ancient Baptist history. and then some on the part after American Crimson Red. But as the Lord would allow and give Jeremy the direction on what he feels the Lord wants him to do, we want to move forward, but we want to move forward in God's wisdom. And
Sure. That's
Yeah.
awesome. Awesome. So some lady named Julie Beller, I don't know who she is. He said, Jim, this is sister.
Hi, Jules.
Hi, Julie.
So she said he loves Civil War history also. So all right, which side did he come down on? I need to know. So
We say that on
okay.
Yeah. Let's just say Dad loved the Bonnie Blue Flag and Dixie, and he was a big fan of Lee. Okay, so
Yeah.
extrapolate from that.
I mean, obviously slavery was horrible and we're glad it's
Right,
done and
yeah.
over
No,
and things there. But the principle of states' rights is
Yes.
something we lost in that, and we've still lost it to this day. And we don't know, like you said, history. Texas, I think, is the only state that has mandatory state history. There, we were going to teach it in our Christian school because Tennessee history is just lost. But it's a great history. And if you don't know anything about their identity, where you came from, then you're going to lose that. And then we become just a citizen of the nation, or now a citizen of the world, because we do not know our history. And as you guys know, American history is not being taught in most schools today. And so you lose all that. So that's neat. I could see your dad with the history buff getting into that and just enjoying that and being a part of that. So those are the questions. If you guys have any more, feel free to type them in. Oh, here's so ask about the bus ministry and Hyles Anderson experience. This is from John Bain. So I think there's a story here we need to know. So ask them about his bus ministry at Hyles Anderson experience.
Okay, he was a bus captain. He loved his bus kids. He had such a heart, and he would, even in later years, he would talk about his bus kids. And I believe that believe he's talking about with Ginger. Anyway, he loved his kids, loved the kids, and just had a real big heart for. And there's some information about the bus ministry in the biography, so I won't take from that. What other story are they? What?
Oh, I mean, Dad was handpicked for the bus ministry because he was could be very much a kid at heart. And he loved being around kids, and he loved reaching kids. He loved being silly when it was time to be silly, and he was very good at it.
Well, the house was great for teaching this, never heard it, a childish juvenile adult. When you become a juvenile, you don't lose the ability to still play and be a child. And when you become an adult, you don't lose that fun, teasing juvenile person. It's Ginger that asked that, if you guys know.
That's why I just said Ginger. That it was probably Ginger. Yeah. Hi, Ginger.
So it's been a blessing. You guys have been great. So all right, Mrs. Beller, we're at the end of this. So the nervousness done. You're like, okay, this is not as bad as you thought it was going to be. When I first called her up and say, hey, we want to do this, like, okay. So see, not painful at all, right?
No, I will say this, that if anybody orders the In Splendid Struggle, we have a limited, and I showed this is a small version of Sacred Betrayal. But it's a pocket size. The Sacred Betrayal is normally about another 1.5 inches bigger. But if they order us In Splendid Struggle, they'll get a free copy of Sacred Betrayal with their order.
Awesome. Beautiful. Beautiful.
Thanks, good
prairiefirepress.com. Brother Vogel just asked, did Jim research in depth the Great Awakening? If not, are you doing anything in that area? I guess that's America. It's been a while since we read this, but Great Awakening. Usually that's, the Whitfield and Wesley and, those type things, Protestant more, but.
Yeah, he spent more time. He did say this several times. One of the foremost men, in his opinion, especially in American Baptist history, was a man named Shewell Starnes, who, in Dad's opinion, Shewell Starnes and that little church in
North Carolina, I think. How many churches did they start out of there? 1,000? I mean,
Well, that's what they called it. 1,000. It was 1,000 points of light is what Dad
yeah,
called it. Because this little church, it was like 600 members tops, which was pretty big for the time, but it dwindled down and down and down because God kept, somebody came out of that church, they went and started another church, then that church started another church, and so on. But getting back to the question, Shubal Starnes was reached by the preaching of George Whitefield. So the Great Awakening, and here's what's interesting about the Great Awakening to me. You see the ministries of George Whitefield and Jonathan Edwards, and you notice about them that neither of them were really liked amongst their own Protestant brethren,
right.
because they were preaching, "Ye must be born again."
Hmm.
What did they do? They had to go out, in the fields and preach that way. What Dad kind of pointed out was, and I don't want to get too deep in the weeds here, but in America at the time, it was difficult, if not impossible, for a Baptist preacher to do what Whitefield and Edwards were able to do, because America at that point was still a bunch of colonies that were mainly controlled by whatever religious sect controlled that colony. Okay.
Yep.
So basically, Baptist preachers didn't really have the freedom that a Whitefield or an Edwards, especially Whitefield, had over here. So Dad was always like, you know what? What did God do? Baptist preachers weren't allowed to get out there and preach. They would end up, now they would do it, and then they'd end up getting arrested. George Whitefield could do it because he had permission without getting arrested, right? So what happened? George Whitefield, God made a great revival here, okay? The Great Awakening. And yes, it was a great revival. But what happened right after that revival was those converts began to read their Bible. And they began to read, you know what? This congregational church that I'm being told I have to come to, like my taxes have to go to support this guy and all that, and I have to bring my child to infant baptism. Yeah, they're wrong about baptism.
Yeah.
I need to go find another church. To the point that Whitefield, if I remember correctly, said to another preacher, he said, "All my chickens have turned to ducks." Why? All of his converts went and got baptized, and that was the beginnings. That was the beginnings of the separate Baptist movement. They called it the separate Baptist movement because these were people that were separating from the congregational church, or whatever the standing church,
right,
standing order church, as Dad called it. So, in a nutshell, do we as American Baptists owe a lot to the Great Awakening? I would say yes, absolutely. God used the Great Awakening to reach a lot of people with the gospel, including people like Shubal Starnes, who would then lead what Dad believed. There's a lot of people look at the Great Awakening and say that's the best American revival. And hey, there's a lot of people saved. Can't fault that. But Dad always pointed to what happened right after that.
Yeah.
It was called the Separate Baptist Revival. And it was a revival, excuse me, not just of people getting saved, but of people, the Separate Baptist Revival was a revival of people getting into the Bible, forming biblical New Testament churches, and starting more New Testament churches. And that happened. If you look at that, Great Awakening happened, right? A whole bunch of people got saved. Then a lot of those people became Baptist people. Then a lot of those people formed new churches. And all of that happened right at the doorstep of the American Revolution. The American Revolution started right at the tail end, what you would call the tail end of the Separate Baptist Revival, which kind of was like the final domino in what started with the Great Awakening.
Awesome.
So,
Brother Vogel, thank you for asking that. That was a great answer, Jeremy, and what a special thing to be able to see what God did with that. And I remember the quote from Whitefield about his chickens turning into ducks.
Yeah.
What a great quote. So, hey, it's been great. You guys have been awesome. Thanks for being on here. Last open-ended question. Anything that I didn't ask you that we need to know, that we should know? Anything that's on your heart, like, oh, I should ask this, or oh, I want to tell this story, or is there anything that you feel like to top this off? Anything that we need to know or should know, or anything special?
I guess if I wanted to put a bow on this, it would be to say what Dad always told us growing up. Dad, as far as his kids were concerned, he was very careful not to push us into a particular destiny that he thought we had. You're going to be a church planter. You're going to do this.
Right.
You're going to do that. It was a really simple statement. He would just say, find the will of God and do it. He said, "You'll do that." He said, "I'll be happy." To me, what defines my dad was there came a point in his life when he found the will of God, and then he did it.
Awesome.
And then the cycle would repeat. He found the will of God about getting saved, and then he did it, right? He found the will of God about going to Bible college, and then he did it. He found the will of God about starting a church, and then he did it. Then he found the will of God about not worrying. He said, "I remember when my head popped off the pillow, and I realized I'm never going to run 1,000 in Sunday school." And he said that was so liberating for me. He said, because it was like God was saying, "Now let's see what I want you to do." And that was just a little bit before, as I recall, that was just a little bit before Soul of St. Louis, American Crimson Red, Multiplying Model, all those other things happened when he decided, I'm going to stop chasing my will and start chasing the Lord's will.
And running 1,000, he couldn't have written those books and wouldn't have left that
Exactly.
legacy and heritage.
Exactly.
He wouldn't have had the time.
It would have been miserable doing it.
Yeah. Find the will of God, like finding who God wants you to marry and go after it, even if she's dating another guy. You know what I mean? I love that. You missed that when you went through that outline.
It's
there.
a great story.
He loved the story. He loved that. He would have enjoyed telling the story.
We didn't know if we could, but hey, it's on the web now. Now you know.
All right. Hey, if you don't have it, go Prairie Fire Press, get this book, In Splendid Struggle. Okay, get that. Get the Baptist history book. Get as much as you can. Great stuff. The Spirit of Soul. I keep saying the Spirit, the Soul of St. Louis, and see those things. Great ministry and life, and embody that. And Jeremy, what a great bow to put on it. Find the will of God and do it. Find the will of God and do it. What it is for your life. And so many times people they don't dream. Where there is no vision, the people perish. What's your vision? I don't know. Why are you here? I don't know. Well, there is a plan. God has a plan. Find it. God wants you to know it. And so to be able to do it. So prairiefirepress.com to get the books. And if you want to take some courses from him, this is him on video. Okay. This is him teaching this. You can go to ibaptistcollege.org and take his courses, and you'll enjoy them and get some great things out of it. Mr. Beller, thank you so much for being willing to do this. Thank you for keeping your husband's ministry going. You could have gone so many different directions with your life, but we are grateful that you how much work and labor and time and money invested to be able to keep this going, and we appreciate it. And Jeremy, what a faithful son to honor his father, and to be able to do this together. What a beautiful thing. And I think it's just the beginning. I think God has a lot more planned. So you guys have been great. Hey, thank you everybody. I think almost everyone stayed on till the very end, so that's really good. This is a hour and 20-minute interview here, but I've enjoyed it. I had a good time. I don't care if anybody else listened or not. I'm gonna have fun getting to talk to you guys, and excited about that. So if you have any questions, anything we can do for you, let us know. And thank you so much for sharing, and get these books, get this knowledge, do the will of God for your life, and see what that is. All right. God bless, and we'll talk to you next time. Take care. Bye now.
Thank you for listening to the Fundamental Baptist Podcast. If you have any questions, you can email us at thefundamentalbaptistpodcast@gmail.com.